interesting that Steve, myself, and Sharon, who's going to talk later, are all from Orlando. So we decided that Orlando is the hotbed of creative thinking. So if you want to get some creative thinking, come visit us in Orlando. Today I'm going to make you a promise. I'm going to promise you that you are going to become a more visionary thinker. And I'm going to show you how. But you have everything you need to be a visionary thinker inside you right now. You just need to know how to unlock it. Steve Jobs, Nelson Mandela, Oprah Winfrey, Martin Luther, and Martin Luther King. Sometimes when we think about these famous, impactful visionary thinkers, we think that they have something or know something or do something that we don't have, don't know, or can't do. And the reality is that's not true. You have much more in common with those people than you might initially think. So what characteristics do they have in common? Well, they're really smart, but so are you. They have ideas, big ideas. So do you. They get stuff done, lots of stuff, and so do you. Occasionally, they piss people off. I'm guessing you may have done that too. And sometimes they fail, just like you. In fact, many of these visionary thinkers fail consistently, regularly, and spectacularly. Oprah Winfrey was a horrible failure as a journalist. She was told by the producers, take out the emotion, tone it down, just the facts. And she actually couldn't do it. And she got fired from 60 Minutes. And by the way, this was in 2017. She was already a hugely successful mega celebrity, and she got fired from 60 Minutes. So, if we have all of these things in common with visionary thinkers, we're smart too, we have big ideas too, occasionally we fail too. What is the real difference between you and them? It really comes down to just one thing. These visionary thinkers have mastered the ability to consistently and regularly tap into the creative and visionary genius that's inside of all of us. They have learned to live in possibility. They see possibility always. Most of us only see obstacle most of the time. This is my friend Anne, and she is, in this picture, starting off on a solo 7-day hike through the Pyrenees Mountains. And all those rocky cliffs you see behind her turned out to be the smooth, easy part of the journey she later discovered. This is the story that Anne told me about this hike. She said, Susan, this hike was the single hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was dangerous. There were crags and crevices and cliffs and sharp rocks everywhere. And I just had to dodge rocks all the time. It was hours of grueling hiking every day, and I was exhausted every day. And I would lie in my sleeping bag at night crying, thinking about having to do it again tomorrow. When the last day finally arrived, I had stopped at a rest stop for lunch, and a trail guide told me it was only 3 more hours to the end. 3 more hours, I can do it. Head down, walking sticks, focus, dodge the rocks, here I go. I barely let myself even take a break for water. And 3 hours later, I looked up and I sank to the ground in defeat. I could see the pickup point, and it didn't look any closer than it had looked 3 hours ago at lunch. Because I had focused so much on dodging the rocks that I had gotten off the path. And I was never going to make the pickup point in time for the bus. I had to call them, and they had to send out a Jeep to pick me up. So I had just spent 7 days of the most grueling work of my entire life, only to feel like a failure at the end because I didn't actually finish. So what happened for Anne? Each step took so much focus, effort, and concentration that she spent all her focus, effort, and concentration on just dodging the next obstacle, dodging the next rock. Too often we move through work and life in this same way, just dodging whatever next obstacle falls into our path. Anne never looked up, created the vision for where she was going to go, and mapped a path to get there. And in the same way, we typically dodge obstacles in our life. We manage the next project, we make the next sale, we deal with the next customer complaint, and because we're good problem solvers, it feels like success. But too rarely do we look up, survey the world around us, and make the choice to envision a different world and decide that we are going to mold that world to be the way we want it to be. Visionary thinkers make that daily choice to see the possibility of a different world. They live in possibility, and most of us live in obstacle most of the time. There's a famous story, I'm sure you've all heard it, that it took Albert Einstein 1,000 tries to perfect the light bulb. And someone once commented to him how sad it was that he had failed so many times. But his response was, I haven't failed at all. I now know 999 ways not to do it. So he chose the perspective to look at this as learning and opportunity, as opposed to the perspective, thank you Steve for bringing up perspective, of looking at it as failure. I'd like to invite you to join me in an exercise that I think will illustrate this. So if you would please, raise your hand up over your head and point your finger at the ceiling. All right, now, look up at the ceiling and pretend there's a clock on the ceiling, an old-fashioned clock with hands and a dial. All right, so looking at that clock on the ceiling, circle your finger clockwise. All right, big circle. All right, now, continue circling your finger, but look at me again for a moment, but keep circling. All right, now, bring your hand down to about your chest level. Keep circling. And look at your hand now, and which direction is it going? It's going counterclockwise, right? Yeah. Some people never believe it. It is actually now going the other direction. What happened?
What happened?
Your perspective shifted, right? So the first time you were looking at the clock from the bottom, and now you're looking at the clock from the top. And it looks different. And what we know from research and experience in creative problem solving and innovative thinking is that we can shift our perspective on how we're viewing the problem, thank you Steve, we can find new solutions. You know, we talked about like, wow, wait, she's created a really good agenda and I'm not sure she knows it. So if we can shift our perspective, we can radically shift our thinking and change our ability to be more visionary and more creative. So we're going to just dip our toe into neuroscience for a moment, only about ankle deep, so we understand what's going on in this yes-but process. All humans have a set of something called cognitive biases. And cognitive biases are mental shortcuts that we use for problem solving and decision making. And I want to be clear that when I talk about cognitive biases, this is not the same thing as personal biases. So there's a lot of discussion about bias and diversity. That is a different concept. Cognitive biases are a neuroscience principle, and all humans share the same cognitive biases. We all share these same mental shortcuts. And it's also important to understand that they operate subconsciously. So we're not aware we're relying on them when we are. About 185 of these cognitive biases have been identified, and we all have all of them. And just, by the way, as a point of information, what Steve was talking about earlier, the framing issue is a cognitive bias, and it's literally called the framing bias. All right? So there's another cognitive bias that's a huge barrier to visionary creative thinking. And this other cognitive bias is called the negativity bias. And the negativity bias is the phenomenon that negative experiences have a greater impact on our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors than positive experiences do. Even though that seems counterintuitive, there is a wealth of research that proves that to be true. And as a result, we are much more highly motivated to avoid negative than we are to seek positive. I'm just going to give you an example of this to illustrate this negativity bias. If you believed that someone had stolen $20 from you, how angry might you be? And then conversely, imagine that if you randomly found a $20 bill in the street, how excited are you? Most people are much more angry about believing $20 had been stolen than they are excited about finding $20, even though the rational value of the money is exactly the same. It's because negative has a bigger impact on us than positive. So, we avoid danger. And that's what's happening in this yes, but. We're trying to avoid the negative. And when you think about where this comes from, it's actually a survival instinct. So I want you to imagine a time way back in our prehistory when our ancestors still lived in caves. And we have a little cave boy, we'll call him Grog. And Grog hears a rustling over in the bushes, and he thinks, I wonder what might be back there. And he trots over, peeks behind the bushes to see. Roar! It was a tiger, and now Grog is dead. So, imagine a different scenario. We have Lucy, a little cave girl.
This is dark.
Gets better. Okay. Lucy also hears a rustling over in the bushes, but instead of wandering over there, she thinks, I think that might be negative, that might be danger, and she runs away to survive and pass her genes on to all of us. This avoidance of negative is a survival instinct, and that survival instinct is alive and well in all of us today. But unfortunately, our brains are not particularly good at differentiating true physical danger from simply uncertainty. Like in Lucy's case, she was not certain it was true physical danger back there. It was just uncertainty that she was responding to. She was responding to the fear of uncertainty. And we still do that today, and our brains are laser focused and lightning fast on identifying that uncertainty in any new idea so that we can avoid the danger. And that's why yes, but is our first instinctive response anytime there's a new idea being considered. It's a fear response. It comes from the amygdala, which is the most primitive part of our brain. It's the part of our brain that controls the fight or flight instinct. And it is a fear response. It requires some courage. It requires us to get comfortable with trotting over to the bushes and seeing what might be back there, which means we have to get comfortable with the idea of potential failure. When I was a freshman in high school, I played on the tennis team. Now, I was on the junior varsity team, but I'd been working hard and getting a little better, and one day my coach said to me, hey, Susan, next week I'm going to try you out on varsity. I made the varsity team. But let's be honest, I'm now the worst player on the varsity team. And I know that, and I know I'm there on a trial basis. So the day of my first varsity match arrived, and I was thrilled and terrified in equal amounts. And the way tennis matches worked at that level was there were 7 matches, literally called number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. And the number 1 match would presumably be between the 2 best players on each team, down to the number 7 match, which would be between the 2 worst players on each team. That would be me. But sometimes a coach would think they could gain some advantage by gaming the system and mixing up their lineup, knowing they would concede a match or 2, but presuming they would win the rest. And that's what happened on the day of my first varsity match. The opposing team's coach mixed up the lineup. And I got matched against their number 1 player, who was a senior who had won the regional championships the prior year. And I was paralyzed with fear. I was so scared that I went to my coach and I asked him to take me out and put someone else in. Susan, why would you want me to take you out of the match? Well, I'm going to lose. Well, there's a chance you're going to lose every time you step on a court. Did you think you would win every match you ever played? I guess not. And if you lose, what happens? Well, I lose. I mean, after that, if you lose, what happens after that? Well, I probably won't get to play in varsity anymore. Do you think that means you'll never get another chance? Of course you'll have another chance. You're getting better all the time, there'll be another chance. You're going to play this match, and I want you to first have fun, because tennis is supposed to be fun. And I want you to use it as an opportunity to learn, watch your opponent, learn from her, try some shots you know you don't make every time. And if you lose, it just doesn't matter. I felt the fear and stress just melt off of my body. My coach just made it okay to fail. He gave me permission to fail. So I did what he said. I went out there and I had some fun. I was bold. I tried things I'd never tried before. I tried shots I knew I didn't always make. And guess what happened? I won! And I won big. 6-2, 6-0, which is nearly a shutout in tennis. And our match was over really fast when most of the other matches were still in their first set. And the news that this little freshman had beat their best player rolled down the courts in a wave. And you could see the morale of the other team sag as they learned the news. And our team had a clean sweep that day. We won every match. And I still attribute it to the fact that my coach gave me permission to fail. So let's talk about work. How often has someone you work with said, I expect some failure, and that's okay? I'm guessing maybe never. And how often have you said to people you work with, I expect some failure, and that's okay? I'm guessing maybe never. And yet we know failure is a part of success. Every success story in any industry or endeavor is the story of someone or a team choosing to see possibility instead of only seeing the obstacle. So we have to find ways to begin to see possibility instead of only seeing obstacle. So this GPS thinking is literally a neuroscience brain hack. It flips a switch in your brain. It flips off rejection, and it flips on problem solving, and it's kind of a magic wand. And if you do it, you will propel yourself out of the sea of obstacle and launch yourself into the pool of possibility. So, start today. Remember what I said earlier about those visionary thinkers? They're really smart. So are you. They have big ideas. So do you. They get stuff done. So do you. And most importantly, they live in possibility. And now, so can you.